Our panelists for today, Mr. Sanjay Bose, Executive Vice President and Head HR ITC Hotels. Welcome, sir. Mr. Andrew Kaushik, Director of Human Resources, the Chedi Katara Hotel Resort, Doha. Thank you for coming all the way, sir. Mr. Kunal Vasudeva, Co-founder and COO, Indian School of Hospitality. Mr. Prashant Gaurav Gupta, Vice President and Head DLF Luxury Malls. Mr. Vikram Aditya Singh, CEO, Claridges Hotels and Resorts. Mr. Girish Sehgal, Senior Vice President, Head Luxury Operations at DLF Limited. Thank you all for joining us today. Neha, please take this session forward.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Radhika, for the introductions here. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think as the trend sets, we're starting a little fashionably late with our session. But I welcome all of you to this very engaging and riveting panel discussion, as I hope it turns out to be, on a very critical subject matter of retention in hospitality. I think this has become one of those topics which is being addressed not only by hospitality industry, but also the industry at large. I think there's always been the introduction has already been done, but I'd like to, kind of do a brief introduction on the panelists that we have with us today. Mr. Bose here from IDC Hotels has been a veteran in human resources with a career nearly 2 decades with the Taj and then onwards with IDC, where he's heading the helm of affairs. Andrew has been a Hyatt veteran and, with the brand for almost about 17 years. Andrew, is that correct? Between India and GCC and now with the Chedi in Qatar, Doha. Kunal here, and obviously all our dear friends. Kunal happens to be an absolute academic expert, brings in the blend from both aviation, education, and now hospitality education in all its respects. Prashant, again, has ITC, so I think we're all curated with the same strong ethos of brand. He's an ex-IDC, used to be, his last stint was at the IDC Moria, and now heads, the entire luxury mall division for the DLF. Chanakya and DLF luxury malls are directly under his oversight, and that's luxury for you on the real estate segment. Across him is Vikram. I'm sure for all hoteliers watching, Vikram is actually a name. And one of the rarest, industry people who've managed to get all the right check boxes on education. So you've got Cornell ticked off, you've got La Roche ticked off. And that's fantastic. Girish also is ex-Marriott and ex-Taj. I think that's a common factor, and he again carries the Glion badging on himself. So thank you very much. Largely gentlemen and and the few ladies that we have here today, and on the gentleman to my left. Thank you very much for being a part of this panel. We're here to talk about the challenges of retention in hospitality. We're focusing on hospitality, but of course I think in the real sense we're looking at the larger trajectory of the service industry. And I think just before setting the tone of this discussion, I think the one thing, and I'm sure both the audience and the panelists here would agree, is that COVID has actually changed the kaleidoscope, not only for hospitality, but all industries in a certain way. And I think it's also created a gradient shift in the minds of professionals who are working within the industry. I think for all of us who've been through hotels, we were used to clinically, 10 to 12 hours at work, no time to think. And I think what COVID did was it set the pause button, gave people the time to rethink, reimagine, and, look at a different perspective in the long-term scenario. So hitting the nail on the head, I think starting from my left, I'll start off with Mr. Bose. Mr. Bose, help us understand, this COVID, of course, has created an enormous stir in the industry. And I think the one impact that it's had in a very significant way is there's been a huge amount of attrition. Played out very differently between brands, but we've actually lost a lot of resources from the industry. either by elective choice or by need or by, the demands that were set in by COVID. I just want to understand, have you addressed this? Because, the kind of people that we've lost from the industry is tremendous. Some of these resources that we've lost are at the absolute top end, and we've lost them to, alternate service industries. Some we've lost overseas, and a large part of this, segment of people has been at the rank and file levels. And I know that that's created a demand. I'd love to invite your views on this matter in terms of, what has been really the way, what has been your experience, from an HR standpoint, and how do you see this playing out in the long haul for the industry?
Yeah, thank you, Neha. Thank you for the introduction first, and then the opportunity. All right, so flashback to 25 years, and you would have this small an ad coming out in the local newspapers saying apprentices wanted. And I'm talking about the Taj Mahal, Bombay. And that ad would have a 2-kilometer long line outside the time office of Taj Bombay of aspirants who would want to join in as apprentices. So that was an era when it was, hotels were the most aspirational place to be in. And if you had to get in, you had to get in somewhere. And now, this entire year, what we're talking about is talent crunch, retention, not getting enough attraction, etc., etc. So here are two bits, the way I look at it. There are two problems that we are currently facing. One is a longer-term problem, and one is a short to mid-term problem. So the short to mid-term problem is this. 2 years of COVID, the axe fell on hospitality. Most companies downsized by 40% or so. People either lost their jobs or they lost salaries, etc. They went on to most of the younger crowd went off to their homes, wherever they'd come from. And they are not very, very keen on coming back to this industry, which has been so harsh on them, So 2 years, the campus placements were dried up, right? No campus hires, so there was no pipeline which was building. Now suddenly, the business is coming back with a vengeance, right? It's not giving opportunity for chains to build up their talent. It's come back at more than pre-pandemic levels in this last 1 quarter. So we are all scrambling for talent. Where do we get that talent from? We have not built the pipelines. The people who were with us have gone back home. They're not very interested in joining this industry. So where do you get your talents? That's one thing. So right now there's a lot of cannibalizing which is going on. And that's not only limited to hotels, it's retail to hotels, it's real estate to hotels, it's hotels to real estate, and so on. The geography bit is coming in with so many jobs available in Europe, US, the Middle East now. Our talent pool is a good, source where talent is going there. So you have this constant churn which is happening right now. To my mind, this is something which is temporary. This should settle down in 6 to 8 months as people find their feet back and that this demand-supply equation sort of starts stabilizing. So in the short term, I think we have to live with this crunch for the next 8 months to a year or so. But that is only in the short term. The longer term issue is that hospitality has been losing its sheen. Okay? If you look at, and I'm very fond of these statistics, 12,000 people who pass out, 30,000 people used to apply for hospitality, 12,000 seats in the national colleges. 8,000 seats used to be filled pre-pandemic. Okay, so about, even of the proportion which was passing out, 40% used to choose hospitality. Rest 60% went to other industries, entrepreneurship, etc., etc., etc. That was pre-pandemic. Now, of course, it's a different story. It's about, the number of pass-outs are about half. Applicants this year, as you know, from 32,000 applicants to national hotel management colleges, the number this year has dropped to 12,000. Okay, so you have a problem in attracting people to this industry. And why are we doing that? One, I think we have lost out in some basics, which we need to look at very, very, very closely. The first is this whole issue of how rigorous our industry is. What can we do to make it a little more less rigorous? Why would someone want and come and work with you for 18 hours a day or 16 hours a day when you can walk across to retail and do the same job for 8 hours a day at a better package, right? So that's the first piece. We need to look at the entire equation of what are the kind of working hours that we ask our people to put in. The second piece is, how do we let our people grow? You know, are we paying them for the right kind of talent, right money, etc.? My answer is probably we need to look at both. We have been looking at the hotel industry within itself and saying 17, 18 hours to kaam karna hi hai, hotels mein kaam karte ho. I don't think that's going to be true. We will have to look at retail, we'll have to look at ITS. We'll have to look at hotels in evolved hemispheres, Western hemisphere, where, you know, it's not that taxing. So that's something we really need to look at. I'm rushing because we don't have time.
I will come back to you for these answers, actually.
The last point. The second is hotel industry typically here the payroll cost operates, if it's 20%, we say it's about okay. Anything more than that is supposed to be bad. In the Western hemisphere, if you pay 20% as your payroll cost, you're supposed to be cheating your people, right? Anything around 50 or more is good. And we have a lot of international experience here on the dais. And bear me out, please, all of you. We need to up our compensation and we need to get it on par with what retail or airlines or ITS, etc. are doing. So just need 2 thoughts.
This is fantastic, and I'm sure this is the road to recovery. So now that it's going to go on air, I think there is hope in the industry after this conversation, at least. Moving on to you, Andrew. You know, you've actually spent the last 5 years outside of country. You've been in Doha. You've been in the GCC earlier. You know, tell us. I mean, what's the view? Because you know, the entire GCC market is now driven, and I think it's one of those destinations which everybody wants to do at some point in time, if not for anything but for the tax-free salary. Here everybody's paying 30% off the nose. And I think you do want to have a stint in your career which gets you into GCC, and you can make that money, right? People take it as a transit point at some point in their careers, make that money and then, you know, kind of more go onwards from there. I want to understand that this, you know, we're talking about COVID and it's really not restricted only to India. It's been a worldwide affair. Has the handling overseas, or let's say in the GCC market, been relatively better in terms of people management? That's one side of the thing that I would like to know. And really, can you please help us understand, because I think we're losing a lot of our senior talent in the industry. You know, people who've done very well out of great colleges, got the right, you know, been in the right positions. These are exactly the kind of people who want to be going out, and we've lost them. And we'll come back to the examples of this panel in a bit. But I want you to explain us to, you know, what is it that is attracting, and how do you see? You know, I mean, I'm sure when you advertise a position, you have more than enough number of people applying from India into those roles. I want your views from, you know, from an international standpoint. When you look at that market, how is the Indian talent perceived by hotels? So if you look at, you know, Indian nationals applying, how is that perceived? And how has COVID management been different as opposed to India? Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. 2 big questions. I think I'll try to be as concise as possible. Let me put it this way. Actually, what Mr. Bose has said about looking at the compensation that we do, I think that's exactly what has happened in Middle East. People who migrate from India into the Middle East, normally they calculate in rupees, not in the local currency. And let me know, whoever is listening to this, please don't think that you would be spending in rupees in Middle East. You know, they would still be spending in riyals. The hardships there are still there, but the affordability of supporting the families back home. Some people take loans and do their education and they want to pay it back, don't want to be a burden on their parents. That's one thing. Second thing, Middle East is used as a stepping stone to move forward. It makes it easier for them to move into Europe, US, or wherever they want to go. It might come as a surprising thing, but cruise lines are to be blamed. The recruitment for the cruise lines happens heavily from Middle East, because they know that we filter people and get the best out of whatever few left in India, and they take the best out of them across the board from different nationalities from us. the problem is the same. Retention, there's an interesting conversation that we had recently in our business strategy plan, saying that in case of business contingencies, we have a plan in place with regards to revenue, with regards to optimization of our expenses and everything, but there is no plan in any company when it comes to talent contingency. What are we as hotel industry doing not to let the people go out? What efforts are the operators doing to retain the talent within the industry? Not being selfish for their own, but at least retain the talent within their companies. Number one is the longevity of employees. You're hiring, in Middle East, the approach is they hire people for the need. I come from Qatar. Everyone knows there's a World Cup that's coming up very soon. We are hiring, okay, Accor, I'm not sure if anyone is here. Accor is hiring 18,000 employees for their accommodation and food service operations. Where do these people come from? Obviously, first choice is India. Why? Because there are a lot of people here. Second thing, the moment we put a vacancy in any of the job portals, the first 50 applications from India. Within a span of 1 hour, I would rather get more than 50. 50 is an understatement, but I don't put any efforts.
Not that I want to break this, but I actually want to ask a question. What is the quality of these 50 applications, Andrew?
I worked in India. I'm working in Middle East. Actually, the quality of people are good.
That's good to know. Yeah, that's...
On the second note, well, during the pandemic, we have been ruthless. I'll be honest. Because it's a contract between the employer and the employee. They treat it the same way. Sorry, no job, nothing supports them. As per law, your employer doesn't want you, go back home. It has been ruthless. But the same people are still waiting to come back and work in the same place, just because they want to recover the loss that they have made. Being in India, will they be able to recover? Maybe it might take longer. But coming back to Middle East, maybe it will be a little faster. That's the only reason. Otherwise, the impact has been same on businesses.
And you say management is also the same, right? I mean, do you think, between India or any other international market, our ability as an industry and our approach to people, is it similar?
Management are pampered in Middle East.
Yes.
Management are pampered. One small scenario, there were some hotel companies that actually gave accommodation and food allowance without a salary, and people were happy to stay because of the quality of life they get.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, coming to Kunal. Kunal actually is, and I think this is a very clear question for you, because here we're talking about the service requirement and the provisioning base which comes from institutions such as yourself. ISH now enjoys the distinguished positioning of becoming the exclusive campus for La Roche and École de Casse in India, apart from having the tie-up with Sunrise Academy. Kunal, very point-blank question to you. How easy is it to get admissions into the college? Do you really find a genuine interest of people coming and, wanting to study hospitality? Number one. And while you answer that question for me, I also have another budding question. How many of these students who actually come in to study hospitality really want to pursue active careers in hospitality? And I think these are two pressing questions which kind of set the tone to understand, because, in this forum such as IHE, you have a strong presence of students, everybody wants to be, this is all about hospitality. Mr. Bose talked about losing the sheen, right? I mean, it's not exactly, you just don't watch the glamour from the outside, you actually look at it from within. I remember Prahlad talking to me about the fact that, students after they go for internships come back and necessarily do not want to be in hotels. I want you to please put some facts and numbers into this whole matrix and help us understand that what is the attraction, both inwards, as in, is it hard to fill the seats? Do you have a tough time getting students in? And from the students who are in, how many want to study and be in the industry?
Thanks.
Thanks.
Neha. To answer this question is very multi-layered. I need to take you back to the year 2008, because that's where the reference point will be. We were operating at that point in time one of country's largest vocational education companies. To what Sanjay had said 25 years ago, when you had an ad in the paper, there would have been queues. And the same thing happened with aviation companies as well. When we put an ad in the paper, there were, in Sainik Farm in Delhi, there was a riot, right? And this is for ground staff and this was for cabin crew. There was a riot. We had to call in the cops. Fast forward the clock to 2012, the numbers dwindled. There was no riot, there was no cop, there was not even an OB van outside. Because from 30,000 people, it went down to about 2,500 people. In 2017, that would have been 200 people. And now you need to put frequent ads in the paper to even get the frontline stuff.
To that, Kunal, I want to add. Now, you want to look at the situation with Vistara when Tata came up, right? We've all heard about it, right? People did not want to go to their jobs. The whole, Indigo team didn't come up. This on-time performance got a big hit.
So
today, the brand is also playing that equal part in attracting talent.
You're absolutely right. So when we started ISH, right, the intent was to have India's first business school in hospitality. Now, when I say business school in hospitality, I mean on the chef side, it's just not about the skills school. It's about being an entrepreneur as well as the chef, that mindset. And on the business, on the hotel side, the hospitality side, so hence we have a Bachelor's of Business Administration. How difficult is it to get into ISH? Well, let's just accept the fact that any new school in India, parents, we are skeptical about any new school in India, right? So it has taken us about 5 years of rigor and going into schools and talking to parents, right? That a new school doesn't mean that it's a new school from a concept perspective. There are industry experienced guys who have run aviation companies, hotel companies, who have come together, right, to come up with this business school. Cut the long story short, 2022, I'll just put it in perspective. The nearest competitor hotel school in India, right, and very good school, in a year they take an intake of about, all programs, 400. This year we will be taking 450, right? So it has taken about 5 years, all right, to come to that position where people are recognizing us and people are accepting us and people are entrusting their children with us, right? So, and it's not necessarily for the hotels.
Absolutely,
No,
absolutely. But what is the interest from the students? Are they genuinely looking to pursue a career in hospitality or the services industry or the business of hospitality?
The business of hospitality for sure, right? There is this whole F&B revolution, I would say, is happening in India. I think it's been absolutely sensitized by so many things which are happening in India, right? So on the culinary part, they want to participate in that. They want to have their own cafes. They want to have their own restaurants. They want to have their own startup. They want to have their own cloud. So there is a wave which we are riding, and this, in my opinion, for the next 5-7 years will continue. But I need to call out the elephant in the room. You must understand, a school is like a litmus paper for what is going to happen 4 years. So to Sanjay and to Andrew and everyone listening, we know now in 2022 of the 450 people, as their first choice, hotel is not even in their 4th choice. And these are the guys who will graduate in 2026.
Kunal, can you list down the 1, 2, 3 of this?
I think we failed. Honestly, we have failed. We have failed. I'm just going to say it. We have failed our employees, right? The biggest crisis humanity could ever see at the end of the strength of any company are the people. One second. The strength of any company are the people. You have called an academic guy, so I need to give you an academic answer.
Totally.
And when in the biggest crisis you let him go, you have created a trust deficit. That trust deficit, believe you me, now you can try for the next 5 years. You have to work extra hard to ensure you get the trust back again. We failed them collectively, right? I am sure people had their own compulsions from their balance sheet perspective. They had. But at the end of the day, the product, I'll give you an example, right? I'm an aviation guy. So if you ask an aviation person, what are your assets? And we'll say, you know what? Airport is not our asset. Airplane is not our asset. We move people who move aircrafts. People are our assets. And that growth, if you look at the chronology of event, what do we say? We say, we are a team, we come in together, we work together, and after that, when we work together, growth happens. But who's bringing in the growth? People.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And we failed those same people. They went to Qatar. I'll give you one more example. Please remember, so I'm finance trained, right? So I'm going to give you from that perspective. 4 years ago, 350,000 Indians went outside the country. This is 2017. I incidentally was the CEO of one of the largest university management companies in India. 350,000. This number is 800,000 this year, going to 1.8 million in the next 3 to 4 years. We are losing 1.8 million 19 to 24 warm bodies in India, whether it's to science, technology, engineering, math, hospitality, architecture, law, name it.
Considering we have the youngest, the
Look
largest number of
at
youth.
the drain happening. It's crazy. It's crazy. Accept that. Once we accept that, let's simplify it then. Where is the problem and how do we fix the problem?
Absolutely.
Right? From a school perspective, right? I'm no one to admonish anyone on this panel, but from a school perspective, we are doing our bit. We are going to each and every school around the country. Today we have a team of about 20 I would call them talent scouts, counselors, who are going every nook and corner of India, talking about evangelizing hotel hospitality, telling them it's a great institution to be, great place to be, right? If we are doing our bit, right, I think on the other side, they must do their bit as well by, I remember, sorry, I'm going to deviate a little bit. In 1994, NASSCOM had this president called Devang Mehta, if you recall, and he completely galvanized IT sector in India. He went to every college, every school. He was part of the PMO, right? Every institution, because at that point in time, people were interested only in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and not computer science. And he got everyone together onto this platform. Colleges on one side, industry on the other side, investors on the third side, and that's where the magic really happened of IT in India. I think hotel hospitality requires that reset and that mindset now. Otherwise, 4 years later, you know, nothing's going to happen, that Indians will thrive. He will go to Qatar. He's going to go to Disneyland. He's going to go to Universal Studios, but he's not going to be in India, right? So
Great.
sorry if I've taken a lot of time.
No, thanks a lot. We have all the time at our disposal. So, great, Prashant. Moving on to you. You've been a seasoned hotelier. You've been an IDC product. And I would say that becomes more than a bit of an umbilical cord after 15 plus years in an organization. And really, I don't want to ask you this as just a hotelier. Let's imagine for a second you're the person who's transited out of industry. And I really want your view from there. What attracted you? What was that one pull factor where, the switch to DLF was easily made from, despite having 15 to 17 years with an organization like IDC. So I'm sure there must be some law of attraction that's playing out, which is not in any manual, which is driven by certain key parameters. And please be candid, when you share your views. And to a certain effect, while you do answer that, and I'm happy to add that little element, I am sure somewhere along the line, this whole compensation and benefits imbalance, for lack of better word here, is also partly responsible for people having to realize and look at opportunities, but I think there's something much more. I want you to please shed light on this. on specifically the pull factors, because it's not you, and I think a lot of people, not only from Kunal's institution and from every other walk of life, are today looking at luxury retail, luxury real estate, and there is something there. So I think starting from you, if you can help us understand what it takes somebody at a senior level to be making that transition. Of course, I think that kind of answers and lends a base to why people from the very beginning want to pursue such industries. Thank you.
So I'll take a cue from what Mr. Bose and Andrew said about, where is it that hoteliers find the industry deficient in comparison to other avenues that are available, whether it is luxury retail or residences or commercial buildings or golf clubs. There are various avenues within the real estate vertical that are available to hospitality professionals. One, of course, is compensation. Second, as they mentioned, is the number of working hours. When you look at these segments within the industry or within luxury real estate, the working hours are very much in line with what you find internationally. There is no disparity on that front. So compensation, number of working hours, for some people it could be a learning curve to add another dimension outside hospitality to learn something new. And fourth, I honestly feel that once you've done hospitality, whether you've completed your education in hospitality, and even better if you've served a few number of years within the hotel industry, it really lays a bedrock for talent to, go to any ancillary luxury industry specifically, whether it is retail, clubs, residences, office complexes, so on and so forth. Even for that matter, they can get into aviation, hospital management. There are a lot of avenues today open which offer far better compensation, better working hours, and a career growth as well for hospitality professionals to look outside. And that, I guess, is a common factor that runs across most professionals when they look at avenues outside hotels. But I do believe that now, I guess the entire industry has realized that these are the issues that one has to look at, and very soon, hopefully in the next couple of years, we will come back from a hotel's perspective onto the same platform as other industries. Because it has happened internationally, and there is no reason why it should not happen in India.
Right. Also help us understand, I'm sure any industry is not a seclusion, Prashant. Do you lose people in luxury retail? And if you do, where do you lose these people to? To which industries?
Well, the attrition rate in luxury retail is fairly low. Also, because of the fact that luxury retail in India hasn't grown to the level that it has grown, for example, in Dubai, Singapore, London, or US. So the industry is growing within the country. Newer cities are getting added. So the existing companies are able to give a career progression to their employees from a retail perspective. It could be different from a real estate perspective, but when I talk about luxury retail, it is growing.
Okay. And in your composite entire team, let's say in the luxury mall management, what is the proportion of hoteliers? Or hospitality professionals, or hospitality...
From an operations perspective?
Yes.
More than 50%.
And the balance 50% comes from?
Balance 50% have grown with the company over the number of years.
And they've organically stayed on, Prashant?
They've organically stayed on.
That is fantastic. So I think we're seeing better numbers of retention. I think we'll come back to this point in a deep dive mode in a bit. Thanks a lot for answering that question. I'll move on to Vikram. Vikram, you've broken the ceiling, right? In a lot of ways.
I just want to thank Prashant for his service to hospitality first. Yeah, we look forward to welcoming him back soon. He's not gone too far though.
I'm hoping this is serving as an unofficial announcement. Great. So, Vikram, you've broken the glass ceiling on many fronts. At the age of 28, you're one of the youngest GMs, took over an area role with Taj Exotica. I think you've continuously given yourself or immersed yourself in quality education. And I think this is one area which is very critical, and no better person than you to talk about it. We've observed, from all our consulting practices, right, whether it be executive search or education or migration, the one focal shift which happened with people when they were made redundant was to add on to their education. Be in a certain way ready to take on employments just beyond the given sector, right? It was no longer the end all and be all of everything. Two important questions your way, and I would choose to make them as direct as I can. The first one being, how important do you think is quality education in the success of reaching the topmost levels in hospitality? And please be as specific. I'm happy for you to draw a contrast, whether it be, alumni from, say, a WMI or an OCLD. Does that put you at a winning advantage, being absolutely top of the line? In comparison to, IHMs today within the country. And that being part one of the same question, the other allied context is how important is international education further acting as an icing on the cake to be able to make a successful career within the larger service industry, not only hotels. And I think, being academically oriented as you are and being a luxury expert, I think your views are going to be extremely crucial to understanding how education today is a critical critical factor for defining success, in the industry as a whole.
Okay. So, Neha, thank you for asking me this question. See, I think business as a whole and industries as a whole, there has to be a balance. Education without, it's like batting. Net batting versus a match practice. Either one of them is, non-comprehensive. So, you need to be able to back up the right educational inputs with the right kind of work experience. And then as you grow up the ladder or go up, let's take an old Maslow's hierarchy, as you go up the pyramid, you realize that there are more inputs that you need. Now, it is critical at all times. It's like your iPhone. You need to upgrade it every so often, and there's a message in the morning. So similarly, look, you can tell somebody while you're running a hotel or running a restaurant or running a hospitality company as such, that, yeah, I got this all under control. You can bullshit everybody, but you can't bullshit yourself. You need to understand that there are inputs that you need to know. You need to understand that. And you need to go back to the drawing board. So, quality education, a strong foundation is very important. Once that is there, you need to qualify it with work experience. And then that will show you the direction for further. So sequencing of your inputs, both educational, are very important, I think. And this is on a global perspective. I think hospitality industry as such is a very international sort of business. You play host to the world. And the more international outlook you can have, the more international thought process that you have, the more exposed you are to culture, the more open you are, more receptive you are to change and accepting of cultures, the more successful you can be. I think it's, now coming back to education systems in India, my father was in the business, my grandmother was in the business, so I'm third generation really. I'm from Rajasthan, we say khamagani, but it's actually come again honey, because that's what keeps the dollars rolling in, right? So, my father went to OCLD. He did OCLD in Cornell. I told him, I said, I want to get into OCLD. He pushed me out, sent me to La Roche. Said, go get inputs. Okay? As an Indian, there was a driving factor. And the driving factor was that I hated being put into a silo and saying, oh, you're Indian, you must be brilliant at mathematics, and you must be from the IT industry. Those guys who show up in Keds with a suit, very brilliant, but a little eccentric. I remember being one of the top guys in my class at La Roche, graduating and joining a company called Four Seasons. I was campus hired. And I think I was the only Indian who was hired for food and beverage. And I started working in Seattle, where you had a lot of Indians, and every other Indian you ran into was in the IT business or worked for Boeing, worked for Microsoft or Boeing. And I think I was the only Indian who worked in hospitality, and one would stand out, literally stand out. And it bothered me as a child, it bothered me. My father told me that we as Indians were not less. And no one is more, no one is less. So I made sure that wherever I worked, I never felt that I'm an Indian and that guy's a European and that person will know more. So I made sure that I've personally taken inputs, La Roche, École Hôtelière Lausanne and Cornell, which sort of bring me to the point that you need to continually evolve and learn. You need to continually evolve and learn and grow. So today, you know, the kind of courses that one needs to go to is, you know, one looks at a Harvard AMP or a finance at Wharton, because you want to lead businesses. Now I'm going to come back to one thing. What happens is that in India, there's a perception, and if you studied abroad, the expectancy is that you'll go abroad and work abroad. That's not true. There's a large legion. I mean, Girish is a Glion graduate, you know, sister school. And there are a lot of people who come back to India and are very happy to work here. You know, compensation and benefits are not singularly just about money. There's so much more in compensation.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'll give you an example of, you know, this recent pandemic, which we're still not through. But I remember I had this challenging new role as a CEO of the company I work for, and the average news on the market was that it's up for sale. You know, so the owner had a discussion with me, and you know, the promoters had a discussion with me, and I said, look, I understand you guys are up for sale, so you know, why do you want me? I met them as a consultant, really, you know, to help them increase their valuation. They said, no, we want to drive this. So our understanding is very clear that we will drive the business valuation up, and if he gets a great offer, he'll be very happy to do it. But in the meantime, you know, I had an excess of 500-600 team members across a few properties, and I realized that really, we really need to look deep inside the hospitality industry to understand. Now, I've got experience working in the United States in management for 10 years, okay? Hotels like the Four Seasons, they follow very, very stringent LQA standards, and the same parameters, they score 95, 96, 97 percentile on those LQA kind of standards at far less the numbers than we take in India. Okay? So I think we need to bring about some sort of, you know, there needs to be a correction. People need to understand how linear programming works and how you need to schedule. So mentally, I'm tuned to working 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. Okay? So guess what? My company, we work 5 days a week, and I have capped it at 50 hours. I said, I don't want you to work more than 50 hours. If you do more than 50 hours, then that's, you know, you're going to work for 60 hours and blame the industry for that. But that's not really necessary, because I've operated that, you know. So bringing in efficient systems on how you can work, it is possible. In France, people work 38 hours or something, you know. There are countries that are considering four days a week. Also, compensation needs to be thought of from the perspective that we've broken it down, like in the US, into fixed and variable. Mr. Bose is right. 50 cents to the dollar is an accurate figure, and you know, during the global economic crisis, I've gone on 60 cents to the dollar as well. You know, right down. So then what happens is it becomes very important. It's a really large asset for the manager of any operation to be able to schedule, because this is the biggest chunk of your expense or an investment. So to be able to utilize your resources correctly is very important. I think that really, really important is to make sure that you are able to add value to people's lives. They're committed to the industry, and they will continue to work for the industry. It's like Adam Smith said, laissez-faire. So there are people leaving the industry, and there are people coming in. You know, there are a number of people leaving the industry. There are a number of CAs coming in. there are a number of people, HR and all the support functions are being staffed from people who are not intrinsically from hospitality. So I think there is a great exchange. There will be a time, it will take some time to level. And yes, Kunal's right, we've definitely failed our employees, because I think that's a leadership issue, really. Because, and I'm going to say it, I think that anybody who's spineless doesn't deserve to be a leader. They've been spineless. They've left their people out there to the wolves. You've not had your difficult conversation, and I'm sorry, we love you hotel owners. All of you hotel owners are lovely people. But the Lalaji who owns a hotel said, "Sabko nikal do." And that manager has stood there and says, "Haan sir, sabko nikal deta." That is the problem. These spineless people who are giving hospitality a bad name. Look at the companies that are governed, who own their own hotels, and the big three in India. Oberoi, Taj, ITC.
I'll come back to that, yeah, because that's an important question. You see, Vikram, and I actually wanted to come back to that later, but glad that you brought it up. I'll give you straight numbers over the last 6 years and leave 2 years of COVID in a negative balance here. 17, 18 and 19, as far as the industry of hospitality was concerned, the largest number of people who wanted to actually move to international hotel companies, Hyatt, Hilton, Marriott, Four Seasons, and that was it. You spoke to anybody saying, there's this great opportunity at IDC, at Taj, at the, oh boy, okay, fine. They felt that the compensation was better, right? The mindset was, no, I want to get into an international brand because probably it opens the way for me to go and work internationally with the company. And trust you me, it was less than 2% of the people who actually join the company and get an international posting in any of the companies. But that was the brand pull. Come this entire pandemic, it has changed volte-face. It has gone, can I get an opportunity to work with the Taj? Can I get an opportunity to work with IDC? Can I get to work with the Oberoi? This has changed not because the money has changed here, but I think Indian organizations have led by example, and they have done a better job at putting people first, and people management somewhere has been the critical way, because the human element of human resources or human capital, I think that has been respected to leaps and bounds, and that's what drives loyalty, because we spoke about loyalty. Brands are still driving loyalty, but they're driving loyalty because they've seen their people through.
Yeah, so just, sorry, I'm taking more time than I should actually.
Please do, please do.
But, so I actually, this was one of I recently did some work on, there's a thesis I've written on this, and it's very interesting. So, I believe that the international companies coming into India sort of skewed the market a bit, because they sort of cannibalized on the talent of the big three. And I won't name any of them because, I've worked for two of them, so, the big three and the third one sitting, Sanjay sitting right here. So they cannibalized on the talent of the big three. And for taking, with two things. One, up in compensation and up in responsibility. They said, okay, you're an assistant manager, we'll make you manager, and you're making 10K, we'll give you 20K. Okay? So they've cannibalized that. So this is artificially created. So how did the market react? Even they moved up. It's all a demand and supply game at the end of it. And there is consumer surplus and producer surplus. You have to understand that. So they created the dynamic conditions where these companies had to come up. Unfortunately, these companies like Oberoi and Taj and ITC and other great domestic players, ensconce it and they don't put everything on the table. Their compensation is far larger than just the take-home pay. So, because people who join them for careers.
Absolutely.
And not just a job.
Absolutely.
And there's a huge difference. So if you look at any senior manager who spent about 15, 20 years in one of the big three, they will say that they learned 25% at IHM, 50% at the company, and 25% their own effort. That's really breaking it down to what their inputs are. So I feel that this is just a leveling of the market. People will realize that you shouldn't tinker with it artificially. I think it's a great livelihood. We in India, we have the highest level of service per $100. You know, Delhi is a great example. I mean, it's a sub $300 market. I have had the privilege of running hotels over $300 a night, but Delhi for $200 a night in New York or London or Paris, you can't even get a shoebox. And they'll tell you, here are your towels, go, enjoy your 2 days, right?
Absolutely.
So India is a place where we give the highest level of service. All our hotels feature in top few hotels of the world. Our Oberoi Hotels this year is again been voted Travel and Leisure #1. Last year it was Leela, and we're right up there. So yes, I really feel that compensation really needs to kick in, but it needs to be done in a sustainable manner. You've got to have fixed component of your salary or your compensation, which takes care of all the regularity. Then you need to have an incentive program, and we've done that. At Claridges, I run an experiment where 50% of salary is fixed and 50% of it is variable. And they are tracked to GOP and revenue thresholds. And once you hit those thresholds, you get that. So let's say in a month you fall below, then you lose out on that variable component. But on a month that you go over, you can earn that back. So the ability to earn it back is a great thing. So we should never cap variable. We should always link variable to say, you hit a 6, you get 2 runs out of it. So that's really my two cents on this.
No, it's more than 2 cents. Great. Thanks so much, Vikram. Over to you, Girish. I mean, I think there's something consistent about having Swami education in common. You yourself have broken the glass ceiling. And I think you've changed the trend in 2 ways. Not only did you intend with full-time jobs to be able to pursue active education, which I think is commendable. A lot of people think about it, but don't act upon it. I think acting on something is more important than simply thinking about it. And I think you've also set up, to my mind, what I would like to call the entrepreneurial spirit. The one thing which I personally, let's put it from an executive search standpoint, we find highly lacking in people is the ability to take a risk. People tend to be very comfortable in the jackets they're in, and they don't wish to change that jacket, right? Simply because, oh well, I need to go to a different organization and prove myself all over again. This is the known devil, I'm a little more comfortable. You've done that, right? You tamed the industry, it was not a hospitality to, switch which went directly into, say, a competition hotel. You went with Fasco, you changed.
Yeah, that was healthcare actually.
Absolutely, yes. Healthcare, facility management, the F&B side of bringing that perspective in. And then was again coming back to hospitality. And that, to a lot of people, is something that they don't think. They think once you've left the industry, it's difficult for you to come back or to have a rejoinder. You came back again with the Marriott and then again went on with DLF. I want you to give this perspective that, in this entire segmentation, one, that international experience obviously aids a lot, right? And this continuing education, and Vikram's also spoken about it, this is extremely important. What is your thought process into retaining talent? How important, what's your encouraging view to people really to go out and take that risk? Because as long as you're just in one place, super comfortable, I think we don't have, you just don't need the think tank. You actually need people excelling. Correct? So, we want you, I would like you to please, lend some perspective as to how important is that entrepreneurial, mindset in really having a successful career.
Yeah. And I think this is now my 6th country and 15th city that I'm working in. So obviously, I think, you kind of break your own barriers in the sense that I moved from Dehradun to Mumbai to Maldives to Boston to a very remote island in Bahamas, and then Toronto. Then obviously I came back to India, and then obviously I did Middle East. So I think, and as you rightly said, I think pursuing that education as well at that right time, as Vikram was mentioning, when you are in that right phase in your mind. So when I was doing a master's, it was a very difficult situation for me because I moved countries, we had a second child, you have a lot of family responsibilities, you're moving countries, so you obviously have to prove yourself as well. But I actually used that period when I was doing my education to take my team along as well. So if there was something about finance, which I was talking about, so you obviously discussed it with your department heads, and you made it into a group project, into a group learning. So as they say that once you start, trying to read by yourself, you obviously retain a little bit of that. But the moment you start sharing it with the team, there's a lot more retention. So I was actually the class valedictorian as well, and at one point I thought I'll be thrown out of the program because I had the dean call me up. I had to go on my sales trip. Falaknuma wasn't doing too well at that particular time, so you had to travel all over. And like my colleagues who would have worked at the Rambagh Palace and Lake Palace, I was the fourth wheel or the fifth wheel along with it, and he said, okay, Falaknuma, we'll come back to you. So there was a lot of hard work which you had to do. So I had my dean also call me up that, you're not putting in that number of hours which you are required for it.
But you actually got a significant number of awards for Falaknuma.
Yes. So yeah, I think I think that's where I feel the moment I actually brought in that, whatever I was studying with my team, and to go back to what you're also speaking, which is very relevant, that I think a lot of hotels don't really realize the inherent need in every employee to learn and grow as well. It isn't just compensation. So whether it is Falaknuma, whether it was Fasco in Dubai, whether it's JW Marriott in Pune, or now with DLF as well, I take 3 days out of my week wherein I reserve about 2 hours wherein we actually sit with the teams and we discuss things. So for example, in very recent times when we speak about it, we spoke about that terror barrier. So, a lot of time, I've had colleagues who've told me that, you are actually teaching them too much. If you tell them to think big or dream big, then they may leave you and kind of move somewhere else as well. I said, you know what, I would rather have a very engaged and a happy associate with me rather than think that, by holding that person behind, I'm doing my company a favor. So we speak about it that if you want to study, what could be certain emotions which would come through. If you want to start an entrepreneurial journey, what could it be? If you want to learn and grow in your organization as well, which is a path for that as well. So I think it creates a lot of transparency, it creates a lot of trust. What Kunal was speaking about as well, that, how do you bridge that trust deficit? That while we are talking about the company's needs, but we're also talking about the employee's aspiration. How do we fulfill that aspiration? That we are with you in that journey. So obviously DLF is also expanding into, obviously there's residences, there's commercial, there's infrastructure, there's project, there's retail, there is so many other avenues which are there for them. So we've actually seen, after speaking about it, we've got a lot more people happier, they're a lot more engaged. We are actually, despite COVID, our turnovers have actually more than doubled. And people would say, who's going to come to the club when you've got Oberoi's or Taj or these other options which are there. But today our clubs are doing significantly well. And maybe it's the word of mouth. We obviously do hire for our new projects because hospitality is a new setup in DLF. And I'm very surprised when I have people at very, very senior level also wanting to come over to DLF. So I think that, employees or talent is looking for that ray of hope where they get to self-actualize themselves to be able to contribute fully. So yes, I think education definitely helps. Risk-taking definitely helps. And, with all of that exposure, important thing is as leaders, how are you giving it back to your team? How do you, help them in that journey and help them make those right decisions. So.
Great, thank you. So, I mean, and Girish, I mean, just also complimenting on what we were just talking about. It's just not that we have people transiting from hospitality, say real estate or luxury retail. There have been fallouts from the other sectors too, yeah? Not every hotelier that I know who's made a transition to an alternate industry has landed being very happy. They sometimes tend to miss a lot of aspects of, you know, having been in hospitality. But at the same time, I think you defy the trend of, you know, having that enterprising, risk-taking ability. And people, you know, I mean, like I said, people have this misnomer that once you're out of the industry is not going to accept you back. That used to happen classically later. At the same point in time, you have people going and experimenting that industry and not being successful. You know, I mean, what is your advice to, you know, young professionals today who are entering the industry? Are we at a realm and stage where we tell them that come and experience hospitality, and how important is it to get some bit of foundation years? You know, anybody doing a hospitality management school and having not done hospitality or hotel industry, I think is missing a very big part of the learning. What's your take on that?
So, you know, I think I'll share a very interesting thing because when I was heading FASCO, that was my first time obviously moving out of hospitality into healthcare. I'd never worked in healthcare. I'd never worked in Middle East. I was never a startup CEO. I'd never worked there. So when you speak about, you know, that experience which you gain when you work with hospitality, I think that apart from your own interest in getting to know the subject, you know, that hospitality experience, as Vikram was saying, you play host to the world, you know, having to kind of go over and meet and talk to senior entrepreneurs or global leaders or heads of state, I think gives you a lot of confidence. So I had this one situation, it was my initial few months heading FASCO, and I had an appointment with the CEO of Mubadala. Mubadala is the sovereign fund for UAE government. It's amongst the top 5 funds in the world. So my objective was to tell him how he was not managing his healthcare properly and how I could help him 3 months into healthcare business. But I think whatever jitters you have inside and the learning which you obviously did and the prep work which you did, we obviously did very well. We bagged the Cleveland Clinic contract. And not just that, we formed a very amazing relationship. That was for the first time. We also got to experiment by bringing Michelin star chefs in hospitals. We had 24-hour room service in hospitals. We had the first lady butler to Queen Mother and Queen Elizabeth as a butler trainer. And we went on to do many, many more things. But to go back to your point, I think that hospitality experience for the years which I spent in was very valuable for me to you know, get that success in the other you know, projects that I took over later on. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Girish. Thank you. I think towards taking this, I don't know what, Radhika, how much time do we have? But let's do a quick rapid fire kind of round to take it to a culmination. And I think we could start, if we could have the mic back to Mr. Bose. I think we're discussing retention challenge and really the, you know, children, how, you know, what their interest levels are to get back into school. And to all the gentlemen here, my question is, what is that one correctional measure to your mind today which drives the law of attraction into hospitality? So starting with Mr. Bose, I think let's hear what's on the number one thing that we should be doing to be retaining talent.
I think I answered that, but I'll say that again. We need to make our working conditions and the value proposition, whether it's compensation or career growth, equivalent to other industries like retail, ITES, BFSI, airlines. That's the first.
And the trajectory, do you see we're coming closer to it? What is your message to the graduating batches now? Should they be looking at hospitality, Mr. Bose?
Certainly, because like everyone in the panel said, it's not just about pure money, because that starts at the beginning of your career, it's attractive, but the kind of value add you get, especially in India, in hospitality, is something which takes you to very great places. Even if you look at the world of hospitality around the world, Indian hospitality leaders are there everywhere. Whether you look at the Marriott top leadership, you look at Hyatt top leadership, you take any global chain and you find Indians dominating leadership positions globally. So certainly there is something that we do here is good, you know. In addition, the kind of managerial, entrepreneurial, leadership competencies that hospitality gives you, it holds you in very good stead later in life. Whether you want to stick with hospitality or not, it makes you an amazing professional and an amazing leader. So certainly, that's the value.
I still want to ask another question. I'm very enthused by your response. The question is, Mr. Bose, how does the organization respond? Let's take the case of IDC. I mean, just for the purpose of this panel. Does it create a void when you lose, people who worked within the organization, to alternate industries? Does that create a serious challenge? My question actually to that is, as an industry, what we've seen is we have not created good number twos. We don't have people ready to take on or fill in the shoes of somebody who's departed. Are we also concentrating on creating effective learning down the line so that if there is an exit from the industry, are there people ready to fill in the shoes?
If you're asking ITC experience.
I'm asking, yes please, and the industry at large.
So ITC, that problem is not there because we have the succession plan, the number twos in place throughout, and that's evidenced by the number of people we get from outside versus people who get elevated internally. Okay, so purely from ITC perspective, we don't have a challenge of getting talent because we are hardly losing talent to start with,
Let's take you as a subject matter expert for HR in the hospitality and not ITC. How do you answer that question?
We need to make it more attractive. I don't think we are responding fast enough to the needs of people coming into our industry, which was not true 95. The example that I quoted at the beginning, we were very attuned to people who are coming in, and it was an aspirational place to be in. If you have to make it aspirational, you need to understand the needs of the generation which is coming out now, which is more about having its own time, having the freedom to operate, which is about getting flexi, it's about gigs, it is about getting time for themselves and their family. I think we need to change our style of working and we'll get it back.
Great, thank you very much. Andrew, the quick question, the quick fire your way is, how long before you move back to India? What does it take for India to attract you back?
I was pushed out, Somebody outside of India left and I had to replace that person. So I would only say that, we Indians are good in management. Definitely, yes. My retirement would be back in India. And adding on to Mr. Bose quickly, I think my one point answer would be that I would agree with what Kunal has said. As operators or as investors, the companies that are coming to open hotels in India should educate the owners who are investing in it. That payroll is not a burden. Payroll is a commitment. And yes.
It's an investment.
Exactly. It's an investment. You see them grow, they stay with you. And as operators, our commitment should be right from the beginning of the hospitality emotion in the schools. I always support that. Because if we do not commit to them, why would they commit to us?
Correct. Absolutely. But tell me about international organizations. I know Mr. Bose said that IDT doesn't have this problem and he's in a happy position. You've been with Hyatt, we've worked together. Tell me, we have the situation of a director of finance leaving a hotel. We don't have the assistant director of finance ready to take on a director of finance role. We have the executive chef leaving. It's not the exec sous chef who's filling in that position. And this is regardless of any department. Our number twos are not equipped. What is your recommendation to, perhaps, and it's not an HR problem alone. I think it's really a collaborative responsibility of everybody in the executive committee, so to speak. What are the checks and balances? What really is the missing problem here? Are we as an industry not thinking through that people are not permanent assets and we could lose them.
I
But why
agree
are we
with
not
you.
prepared?
I agree with you. I'll put it in single word. It's the problem of mindset. If the person can be a good number 2, why can't be a good number 1? When you could support the number 1 who was there before, why can't you support the number 2? Now, it's a problem of mindset is what I'm saying is that certain times, I think it's the fear of taking decisions. If I promote the number 2, if he does a mistake, then it's me who will be held responsible. Maybe that's one thing. Second thing, if you know the number 2 was not good, why didn't you get rid of the number 2 and get a better one even before your number 1 leaves? So it's all the mindset. The only problem with us is that let me see. In hospitality industry till date, we still carry some books which are almost eaten by termites. That means the old procedures, but we still want to be a modern company for the people who are coming these days. I think we need to get rid of that. Have something for the day, for the current generation, and how people look at the business.
Thank you, Andrew. Kunal, to you I ask, and really, why is hospitality education today the most, is equally as important to going and studying management? What are the pull factors? What do you have to tell to people who today are confused about pursuing hospitality? Like you said, it's business education largely. What is your, insight into this, where people are afraid to venture into hospitality today? Because you're seeing it from the point of academics. We're thinking forward into the future. And I think this is a critical part of the education. So what is your message really for people who are now in double minds about pursuing this as a career choice?
So Neha, when you talk about hospitality, we are victims of our own perception.
Correct.
Right? And we need to change that perception. And we've been doing that as a school for the last 5 years. So hospitality, I think Girish, Vikram, everyone said that it's a mindset, right? It's that agile working mindset which we adopt in business education for hospitality and which they adopt eventually when they kind of work. But to the point, I'll just do an add-on what Andrew just said. If people, and Vikram also perhaps prompted the same thing, if people are moved from, unfortunately, the liability side, which is a compensation, to the asset side, which is a unit, and you actually put value to that, right? And then you apply that to any industry, that industry becomes extremely aspirational, right? If we have lost the sheen, let's get the shine back.
Are we preparing enough people to enter the sheen?
Right now, as I said, we are looking 4 years ahead. So right now, at least I can talk about my institution. The hotel hospitality, I'm not talking about the luxury retail, but the hotel hospitality part of it is number 4 or 5. But remember, we have 4 years.
Correct.
We have 4 years with them, right? The participation of the industry coming into the schools, the participation of the industry talking to the younger generation, right? And if we galvanize that support, right, 4 years down the line, 3 years down the line, 2 years down the line, we would have again shifted that mindset. It's a great industry. I think everyone agrees to the fact that you take a hospitality person and put them into any industry with business and finance education, they'll outsmart the hell out of everybody, right? But the problem, of course, to Sanjay is retention, to me is attraction.
Correct,
right?
correct.
Are we attracting the right kind of students in the first place, or is that number dwindling? We are doing our bit, as I said, but we cannot do it without the industry support. And it needs to be that collective soul which needs to go out there and really evangelize again this entire hospitality.
So we're dealing with something which is controllable.
100%. Everything is controllable. I think the pace in which the industry is changing, I think we just need to pretty much pull ourselves up and say, you know what, we need to do this. If we apply the mindset, will it be done? 100%. 100%.
Fantastic. That's very encouraging, and I think should be very encouraging to all, everybody who's tuning in with us on this. Prashant, I'm sorry to put some, quick fire questions to you. I mean, the one thing which is there with people is sometimes they say, get out of the industry, make a switch, correct your comp and ben, and then return back. Because somewhere you could be an indispensable asset. And I think we've got a bit of cue that you may be returning back to mainframe, and I'm hoping that's true. But tell me something, because this is actually a fact, right? A lot of people say that I don't get correction. I'm organically growing within the company. Nobody respects me. Somebody comes from outside, they get a 30%. I've been with the company, I only keep getting a classical 8 to 10%, and that also by chance. Otherwise, it averages out at 5 every year. So, and therefore, I mean, I do want to understand what, there is something obviously beyond just the compensation. There's something which is pulling back. There is some connection, there's some bond which is drawn in. Is your outlook buoyant with hospitality? And what do you have to say to people who actually have ventured out?
Very buoyant with hospitality, definitely. There's an old saying, once a hotelier, always a hotelier.
You miss it?
Oh, yes.
Enough to come back?
Well, that's debatable. But, like Girish, he went out, he came back, went out again. So, once you work with hotels, it's not necessary that once you made an exit, you can't make an entry back into the system and venture out again. It is, and it's not necessarily true that you only get a 30% hike if you switch industries. You could switch companies and get a hike as well.
No, I know of companies, and without naming, some of them are present on the pedestal here. We know of more than 50-60% transition, and some have been even getting close to about 80% change in the compensation and benefits, simply because our compensation structures have also been archaic. We're looking at basic. You want to do your HRA. We don't have flexible models to do compensation and benefits in a way where it impacts the take home. Andrew's dealt with this problem. I'm sure Mr. Bose has dealt with this problem. We are not with the mindset of individuals who want a high basic, and therefore you want that HRA and you want the provident fund linked to it. Today's Gen X or Gen Y, either which ways, is not used, or the Gen Z as a bit, so I'm talking about all gens, literally. It's not about what am I going to plan for the future, how much am I going to get in that provident fund kitty, which is being contributed 12%, right? For me, it is actually the actual value of what the monetary value that I can utilize today. So somewhere that also is extremely important. So it's,
It is very important. And once you reach a general manager's position or you're in the general management bracket, whether you run a hotel or you run a real estate, arm, whether it is retail or any other aspect of the business, the dynamics are more or less the same. You are dealing with a luxury consumer from one perspective or the other, and switching in and out is something that can keep happening. So, I would treat hospitality not just with hotels, but with various other divisions within that large terminology of hospitality. Why only limit it to hotels versus the others? For me, the way I would look at hospitality is that there are various facets to hospitality, depending on which ones can you touch upon. Because the soft skills or by and large, the general skills of business management more or less remain the same.
Absolutely.
Whether you run a mall or you run a hotel or you run a golf club or you run luxury residences, the ethos are the same.
Absolutely.
It's just the way you do business changes to a certain extent.
Totally. Thank you. Thank you. Vikram, from you, of course, I do wish to understand, and you've been, you not only have led hotels, so many of them over the last more than a decade plus, right? Different countries.
That's an interview question I got asked. I must interject on this. So I was told, oh, you work with Four Seasons, you work with Taj Hotels, you work with Oberoi Hotels, you work with a few classic hotels. So what's the loyalty factor? So I said, well, 3 generations, 20 odd years, never thought of being a car salesperson, always in hospitality. So some of us, and I think a lot of us intrinsically, are committed to the industry. So I told them, I said, loyalty, yes, 200% to the industry. I walk into somebody else's hotel, I find a piece of paper, pick it up. Somebody asks me, if I walk in a place in a suit, they normally assume I work for the hotel. They'll ask me, excuse me, bathroom kahan hai? Certainly, please follow me, I'll show you. So that comes intrinsically, that's part of programming. So it's The answer was like, please think of us as brain surgeons for whom the pursuit of surgery is important, and sometimes the hospital is irrelevant, as long as it's within the industry. Okay?
Correct. Correct.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the question is, what does it take to stay put in the industry, regardless of COVID, regardless of salary, regardless of any other factor? What is the commitment that it takes from an individual to tirade through an all-season journey in this industry?
It's an age-old question. Why did Gautam Buddha give up the palace and go and become the founder of Buddhism? Okay? So, you have to have, organizations need to be able to define a purpose. Because for the longest we've talked about vision, mission, and values. So, this time has now brought upon us a new word, and that's purpose. So those whose purpose, life purpose, is identified with the industry purpose, and if the company or company can sort of align to that, that's the Tripura that you shoot the arrow through, then yes, people will stay. But what people are looking for is a meaningful life, engaged, etc. There are a few things that we really need to sort of focus on. I mean, we can't run the way we always have. We have to evolve as an industry. We're in an agile world. A business school term I learned a few years back was VUCA, volatile, uncertain, competitive and agile times that you live in. But very important to understand is there is a new form of leadership that is out there. And there's a lot of talk on this. It's called servant leadership. Now, servant leadership is something that the top of the pyramid and that person views it as the bottom of the pyramid. In hospitality, we're experts. I know who's staying in the hotel and what they like, and they're millennials, they want this, they're Gen Y, they want this, Gen Z. So we need to turn that same focus internally. We need to say, these are the people, this is the persona of the people that we want to hire, we have a guest experience journey and that's fabulous. What is I won't even say employee. That's a dead word. You've got to say colleague. What is my colleague engagement journey? What are the things that are important to them? And how do we get there? We can't answer all those questions overnight. There are different things that are important for different people, but it's definite. The world is becoming a smaller place, and people know that in the US, you work 40 hours, this much, you work this much, So we need to break some of these. For example, I was talking to a few hoteliers and said, why don't we just have a common pool of banquet servers? Oh, they said, oh, that's such a radical idea. So I said, well, I was a banquet director of Four Seasons in the year 2000, and we had a common pool, yeah. We called each other up and said, okay, I need 4 waiters, you need 3. We would get all these guys. So we need to allow people to have 2 jobs. I had people I managed in Four Seasons Seattle. The guy used to be my room service waiter in the daytime, and after his 8-hour shift, he went and worked for 4 hours at the hotel next door. There was no problem. Managers were not allowed to do that. So we as an industry need to encourage that. We need to be able to say, we only want to push you 5 days a week, 10 hours, or make work-life balance really work, because it's really important. Compensation needs to be looked at. People understand that there are unfortunate times and things dip, so you dip with it. Intrinsically, we need to understand. There's that song by Dido. It's called White Flag. So I won't surrender. And unfortunately, during this pandemic, and maybe it's learning for bigger things to come, we shouldn't surrender. No business mandated that you get rid of all your USP. I mean, employees, colleagues are assets. This is what it is. We are in the people industry. Selling, what are we selling? We're selling 50% of what we're selling is highly perishable. What I didn't sell last night, I can't sell tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So It's the experience that you're selling. You must explore Porter's value chain and understand how accommodation is value added and what is the multiplier, its employees. So number one thing is to understand that we're a people business. It's a very people intensive business. So definitely we need to gear towards that. We need to identify the colleague experience journey and put touch points that are important to them. Whether it is medical plans, whether it's family benefit plans, whether it is, a small thing like a creche, education reimbursement, take care of you. I mean, who does it better than the armed forces? I mean, people are willing to spend a lifetime in that, in the armed forces, because look at the benefits they have. Why can't we have a similar set of benefits that are identified for the needs of Gen Z? Gen Z is very different. They're not transactional, but it's important for them to feel part of the purpose. So going back, I think the singularly most important thing is going to be for organizations to align what is the real purpose, why are they here? I remember I was speaking to some bankers and they asked me, Vikram, you seem to be very passionate about the business, but what about money now? So I said, do not be under the wrong impression. For me, I'm very passionate about this. I love creating concepts, doing this, and wow, we created this for the guest, etc. But for me, business is only a series of cash flows. Some negative, what is the positive, what is the IRR, what is the net present value going to be? So, unfortunately, 2020, 21, just have to be viewed as slight negative blips where the benefit will come. A lot of people surrendered on the way. And that was leadership, spineless leadership. That's not good. We need to stand up. I had several difficult conversations, and you have to stand up for the people who work with you. Absolutely. It's that you got to bring that platoon commander in. Your senior gives you an order that's not in the benefit of the platoon, you stand up. You take it on the chin for the team, and that's what leaders will be. And those leaders can only be like that if they have come the right way, they have the right education, they have the right confidence.
And people move with them, Vikram, correct? Good leaders, if they're moving, people are moving with them. Yes. Teams move with them, correct? Yes. The ship sails together.
Yes.
Correct?
No, I think it's all about camaraderie and, life itself, like that movie Forrest Gump, says life's a box of chocolates, you don't know what you're going to get. So ideally, we're all faced with difficult complexities and we need to collaborate to overcome them and we need to understand and take a rethink. One size does not fit all. You have to look at it and it's no longer good enough to say, sorry, that's our policy and this is, you got to throw the red book out because the red book wasn't there for the colleagues when they needed it most. So you got to rewrite that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Vikram. And the final closing question to you, Girish. Tell me, did the organizations do enough to retain you? Oh, I don't want to make it a personal question. Let's understand, do organizations do enough? At the point where the breakaway is not out of any negative reason, it's really to pursue, larger opportunities or maybe experience a different learning. Do you think that organizations can do better in holding their people back if they're really losing the skilled talent? Do we go, do we do the last mile execution, really, in retailing our talent?
I think the honest answer would be no. I'll just share with you some examples where, despite the conditions, I worked on remote island Maldives, I was at Taj Exotica, Sanjay was there when I was there with Taj. The opportunity, and maybe because I wasn't in the mainland, you were there on that offshore, you could do a lot more. So there on Maldives, you could do coral reef regeneration, you could work with the tourism minister and work on, culture building, you could do your own apprenticeship program or whatever. It was very fulfilling. Fortunately, I came over to Falaknuma as well, and I think there as well, the mandate was turn around that property because it was doing 2-3% occupancy, seen as a white elephant. And there as well, we worked a lot with, the royal families, whatever that stuff. But when you come over to some of the traditional hospitality, I think the expectation that as a general manager, and obviously I'm saying general managers at the top of the food chain at the hotel, and even there are limitation of boxes. This union handling should be done by this person, this ownership dealing should be done with that person. And maybe quite a few of the people or in those positions may need support, but there are many of them who may not need that support. They find it fulfilling and they don't want to be boxed up as well. Just coming back to DLF, I think I still have the hotelier hours at DLF where I work through. There are long hours. But I think what is really enjoyable is that the whole business understanding, I've understood so much about the legal aspect of it. I've understood so much about construction and project and engineering, and I'm involved in new projects which are coming through. I work very closely with the promoters, and then you really don't even mind the long hours. Thankfully, the compensation is also very good. But I think to say that if the hospitality does everything to retain possibly their top talent or top performing talent, I think there is a lot more scope.
So there's this classical saying, right? Nobody's indispensable. But tell me, if hotel versus any other organization had to retain you, which one do you think is going to take the effort more?
I think the clear example is DLF has done more than enough, as in they far surpassed my expectation because they did value what I actually had thought about. And you do feel, and as I said, compensation is one part of it, but had I not been satisfied or felt that I'm not just contributing but also learning, I would have possibly looked outside because
Great.
You are exposed to it.
No.
Yeah, ownership. Yeah, so you look after the entire business from end to end, and you seek that support. You have that mandate. But yes, I think hotels still want to go over. Oh, let's not disturb the apple cart syndrome. 8%, 10%
But
is.
good. We have these levels, and therefore we have to restrict the capping at this level, which obviously creates, right? So
What if the other GM gets to know about it and will say about it? But I think in DLF, if I have to say, though I've come over very recently, I think the appreciation and the monetary and fulfillment has been significant. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you very much for everybody on this panel for this, very wonderful and honest and truthful exchange of views, which is what we're here for. We started late, we ran late, but I think it's been a good run of discussion. And thank you very much for the audience to, be with us today. And I'm hoping you've had a good time with this discussion. Great. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Neha, for such insights and such a wonderful session. A small token of appreciation from Team IHE. May I request Soris ji to please come on stage and facilitate the speakers on behalf of IHE. Soris ji. I think session is incomplete unless Soriji comes on the stage.
Unexpected call,
Mr. Sanjay Bose. Mr. Andrew Kaushik. Mr. Kunal Vasudeva. Mr. Prashant Gaurav Gupta. Mr. Vikram Aditya Singh. Mr. Girish Sehgal.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Thank you.
For the photo up with the.
They will take it. Neha, thank you for moderating.
Oh, wow.
A pleasure. I thought I'll take some weight off Mauritius shoulders.
Your questions were longer than the answers.
No.
That's why we have the time to discuss them
Yeah,
again.
absolutely.
But it was the longest session of this whole.
See, you got
conference.
bored, I didn't. She said, come and tell us, जब भी हो जाएगा. Suresh will wrap it up in 5 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Has it been done?
Yeah.
Photo. Oh, there's no photographer.
Video.
Okay, we'll.
Man.
But you're on the video. Please, Singh. Please. After for the video. When it's done, please let us know.
Thank you so much. Thank you.